Professor Glees, I want to talk to you first. Is it right that people are now rethinking bringing Shamima Begum back to the UK?
No, it's entirely wrong. Nigel Farage is tying himself up in knots, and I think we all know why. He extolled Elon Musk, and then a few hours later, Musk said he wasn't a suitable leader of the Reform Party and suggested we have Rupert Lowe, MP, most people haven't heard of him, in his place. And then Sebastian Gorka says the UK has got to take Shamima Begum back. It's something that Nigel Farage used to be totally opposed to. And if we were to do what Farage says he's thinking of doing, and remember, Farage also says that Shamima Begum wasn't the worst kind of ISIS terrorist, then she would come back to this country and be locked up. All of that is, I'm afraid, complete nonsense. Shamima Begum is not a British citizen any longer. If she's to go anywhere, she has to go to Bangladesh or a similar sort of country. And as for our policy, it's very clear. We want to deter people from joining ISIS, from doing what Shamima Begum knowingly did all those years ago. She's never properly expressed any remorse for what she's done. She's serviced ISIS killers, and there's a possibility of an ISIS resurgence now following the fall of Assad in Syria. So whichever way you look at it, Nigel Farage is, in my opinion, prepared to sacrifice our national security and the policy of conservative governments to strip her of her citizenship and keep her out, to sacrifice that in order to stay in lockstep with the vicissitudes of Trump's new White House. That's unacceptable. It's got nothing to do with sovereignty, which was Nigel Farage's big call to the British people over the European Union. You know, we don't want to take orders from Brussels. Well, he clearly does want to take orders from Trump's White House before Trump's even got in there.
I mean, there is this interesting dance going on, isn't there, as you say, and a couple of people texting in this morning. Simon says Farage now has to echo everything the Trump camp says. They own him, says Simon, although Elon Musk, interestingly, disagrees on Shamima Begum and says that he doesn't think that she should be repatriated to the UK. So God knows what's going to happen when Trump does become president and his own advisors start arguing with him about this. Ian, you have met Shamima Begum twice, which must have been a very, very fascinating experience. What's your take? Do you believe she should come back to the UK?
Absolutely. I think, obviously Farage is acting as a sort of lickspittle to Donald Trump's team, but that doesn't mean he's wrong in this count. The reality is that these were very silly, confused people who went and did something really stupid. I have no sympathy whatsoever for what they did. They went and served a death cult. At the same time, there are two issues. One is they are British citizens, like it or not. Shamima Begum had nothing to do with Bangladesh. She'd never been to Bangladesh. And the fact that she could be stripped of her citizenship merely shows that rights for the government are something which are sellable, and that if you are from an immigrant background, you don't have the same rights as someone from British citizen. I think it was a very wrong thing to do. But also it's an issue of safety. It's an issue of security. These people, it's up to Britain to judge whether these citizens of its own country are dangerous or not. They should be held in British prisons and then released only when it's safe to do so. At the moment, where they are left is in a camp which is filled with radicals, and it's also in a place where there's still conflict going on. With the fall of Assad, there is a danger that these people will be released or set free, and therefore that would be far more risky for Britain than for Britain to come back and evaluate them and work out what to do with them.
Professor Glees, I can see you shaking your head there.
I'm sorry. I think what Ian is talking is total nonsense, and it's totally what the Daily Mail does not believe in, as I have often shown. No, she can't come back to Britain because she's not a British citizen. And if you suddenly say, well, she is a British citizen, you're making a complete fool of our national security policy in respect of ISIS fighters, and they remain a real threat to us here. As for locking her up in prison, we don't just lock people up in prison in this country. They have to have a trial. But how can there be a trial? What Shamima Begum did was help ISIS killers in Syria, in and Iraq in a state which no longer exists. If you say she comes back to Britain, you are in effect letting her off scot-free, and she will become an icon. She will become a Mother Teresa to people who hold the same misguided ideas that she does, of whom we know there are many in the United Kingdom. Tens of thousands is the way the police call it. We would be completely mad not to remain very firm on this. She threw her passport away. Where she goes now is her business. It isn't ours.
Well, that's an interesting point there. Ian, what would we charge Shamima Begum with if she did come back to the UK? Because her crimes were committed in Syria.
Well, it's illegal to go and join a fight against abroad anyway, so that she'd be charged with that for a start. It's not very hard to find things to charge her with. And it's absolute nonsense to say she threw her passport away. The reality is she was stripped of it by the Home Secretary. And that's not throwing your passport away. It was Britain throwing away its duty, really, to work out if these people are dangerous or not. And Britain is at far more risk when people are threatened with being free to go off and commit acts again. Far better to bring them back, charge them, do what a democracy should do, which is apply the laws of the land and justice, and then to work out who is safe and who isn't safe. The idea she become an icon is just absolute nonsense. And the reality is some of these women, I don't know with Shamima, and that would be up to the experts and the courts to determine, some of these women went there as teenagers. Shamima and her friends were 15 when they went, did something which some of them acknowledge was extremely stupid. And there should be a chance of rehabilitation and redemption for these people, even when they go and do something so awful and so stupid and so evil as join a death cult like ISIS.